imagine a global business that doesn't reach its targets, that can't attract enough talent, and doesn't innovate, and that relies on a system that it developed in the industrial age in the 19th century. It would be so hard to imagine such a business surviving. In fact, it would be bankrupt. And I'm just described to you our education system. I believe it's broken and it is bankrupt. And I'm standing here saying this to you as someone who has worked in education for over 30 years, as a teacher educator, and most recently as a head of a school of education. But I haven't always felt that way. I'm going to bring you to a classroom in the 1970s, and it's in rural Ireland. I want you to picture it in your minds. It's colourful, it's vibrant, it's busy, and there are children sitting all around the room on beanbags. Our teacher, Mary George, is walking around with a newspaper. It's Monday, and we know that our project for that week is going to be inspired by that newspaper. She shakes open the newspaper and she announces that there is a movie in the cinema called Jaws, and we don't know what she means. She describes how Jaws is a movie about a shark. She tells us to take out pieces of paper and to draw the shark on the paper. She explains that this shark is so big, he's going to fill our classroom. So we set about doing it. We take out encyclopedias and we begin to try and find out about the life of a shark. What do they eat? What do they look like? Where do they live? We fill the classroom with all of these images and facts, and then she announces that we're going to make this model out of papier-mâché. So we do that, and he does fill the classroom, and the smallest girl in our classroom is able to walk inside him and paint his ribs. So that was just one project in 1 week out of 40 weeks that I spent in Mary George's classroom. So as a child, I moved around a lot. I lived in many places in Ireland and I went to 5 different schools. Teachers became so important to me in terms of how I might fit in. And basically, Mary George became the most important teacher in my life. That was because she brought the world into the classroom. She used the project as a portal. She brought all of these disciplines in around it. So for example, in Jaws, she brought in English and art and geography and history and anatomy. And she ignited a curiosity in me that has lasted through my lifetime. And so I'm standing here today really disappointed and disillusioned because I'm telling you that now the education system is so far removed from that. It is definitely broken and it is bankrupt. And why is that the case? There's 3 reasons. The first reason is that it's so far off meeting its target. So it has a global mission to reach United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 4 by 2030. We've just 7 years to reach that. It's all about quality education. And put more succinctly, it's about equitable quality education and promoting lifelong opportunities for all. However, what's happening at the moment is it is inequitable. It is not fair on all the learners in the world. And that has been really caused by a polycrisis of war, of climate change, and of the pandemic. And all of these have converged to really deepen a global learning crisis. The shock that has most heavily hit the education system has been the pandemic. So I'll give you some figures around what it has actually done to our learning across the planet. So first of all, in terms of school closure, there was 1.6 billion learners across the world. They were affected by the pandemic. And that represents 90% of global learners. In addition to that, 147 million children lost out on half of their in-person learning. And I think of those 147 million children and what it might be like for them not to meet their Mary George each day. On top of that, There was inequitable access to devices and to Wi-Fi, and that further impacted those learners. Learners, according to UNESCO, lost 2 trillion hours in learning during that time. There were school dropouts before the pandemic of 1 in 10 children, but after the pandemic, that number has increased by 48 million. And then the World Bank tells us about learning poverty. So in terms of learning poverty, we could say that 70% of 10-year-olds now are unable to read and understand a simple text. And I wonder what that might have been like for me at age 10, not be able to read or understand a simple text, and how that might have impacted my life chances. And as we funnel all of these things down, this is called an inequity in terms of how the numeracy and literacy levels are in classrooms, and also on children and young people's well-being. There are 2 other reasons that are really causing the education system to be bankrupt as well. The first being the talent shortage. I was so shocked to learn back on World Teachers' Day, back in October in 2022, that we are short 69 million teachers globally, and that deficit is most strongly felt in sub-Saharan Africa. And this is due to the fact that the conditions for working as a teacher are really very, very poor at the moment. There's poor wages, and also the training is not always great as we move around the world. And I do wonder how that has really deepened the global learning crisis. And in fact, if Mary George was choosing a profession today, would she have even been a teacher? And the other reason, the final reason that I believe the education system is bankrupt, is to do with its lack of engagement in innovation. So I could walk into a classroom now and I would feel I'm back in the 19th century. Teachers at the front, who are the knowledge holders, and all of the children sitting in neat rows looking up to the teacher and waiting for the teacher to teach them. In that kind of environment, it points to the teacher as being the most important one, whereas my experience in Mary George's classroom was about learning democracy. It was about her feeling that every person in the class had something to offer to the learning situation. And she believed that space was the body language of a classroom, hence the beanbags and the round tables and the artwork. So it was a learning democracy that we were living in there. And then in terms of the fact that assessment in our education system is rewarding regurgitation. So you learn something by heart and you have to feed it back during the assessment system. What that is doing to learners is it's forcing them to operate at the lowest level of Bloom's cognitive taxonomy. And that means they're just being asked to remember stuff, rather than understanding, applying, analysing, evaluating, and that holy grail, which is creating. And that's where Mary George encouraged us to play when she designed our learning experiences. And then finally, it's their, I would say, lack of engagement with technology. We are in a technological revolution at the moment. It's the most exciting time. And it appears to me that the education system is really afraid of it. It's really spooked by things like metaverse and by Web3, and it doesn't know what to do with it. And I do think that Mary George would have grabbed those VR glasses, and she would have brought the technology into our classroom and encouraged us to use it in our learning experiences and through her pedagogy. And so what that is leading us to is this factory model of education. It's like a production line. So I'm finding that learners are coming off that production line, and basically they are bleached in some way, and they're broken a little bit by the experience. And they don't possess the skills that the World Economic Forum want them to have for life and for work. And they are the ability to collaborate, to solve complex problems, and to adapt to changing circumstances. And I don't think Mary George's version of education would have even lasted or survived in such a factory model. Now, there is some hope, however, and that hope is in the form of the people sitting in the audience, the learners. learners are starting to do something really interesting. They are actually taking matters into their own hands, and they are becoming prosumers of knowledge. What I mean by that is they're using technology to produce and to consume knowledge, and they're basically showing that to us by their TikTok videos. So they're creating TikTok videos that are able to actually do everyday hacks. They're also using ChatGPT to create scripts for their Instagram reels. And they're showing us by doing that all of these amazing meta skills, such as being able to storyboard, being able to video, being able to edit, being able to pitch. And they have the World Economic Forum skills of being able to collaborate, of being able to adapt to changing circumstances and solve really crucial, complex problems. More than that, they are driving the trends on how learners want to learn. And it's the direct opposite of what's happening in the education system. So they're showing us that they want learning to be personalized. They want it to be social. They want it to be environmentally aware. They want it to be culturally sensitive. They want it to be gamified. And in doing all of that, what they're telling us is they want people to be back in the center of education. They want it to be people-centric. And I'm calling those learners, they are the grassroots disruptors of what's going on. And then at the other side, which is really, really exciting, is we have Society 5.0. Society 5.0 is what I call a policy disruptor. And the Japanese government back in 2016 put this on our table. And it is a philosophy of education, which the world has embraced. To date, there have been 4 other societies, and those have been the hunter-gatherer, the agrarian, the industrial age, and the information age. And I would say for the past 200 years through the industrial and information age, the focus has come away from people. If we look particularly to the information age, it was all about how we as humans could understand technology. What's beautiful about Society 5.0 is it flips it, and it's basically demanding that technology is in the service of humans. It's about making people's lives better. For that reason, as you can see here, it's called people-centric and super smart. It's trying to solve the most complex societal challenges that are facing the world, such as the aging population, climate change, and food poverty. And when it is doing this type of I suppose, this type of philosophy, I still think that there are some flaws in it almost. There's something else that could possibly be added to this particular philosophy. And I'm suggesting that with climate change, we need to go beyond it just being people-centric. It actually needs to focus on all of life. So human and non-human stakeholders. So I've been bold here, and I've actually just done it. I've just put in life-centric instead of people-centric. And the second piece that I think needs to change is that education must appear on that list of pillars. It didn't appear in the previous version, and I want to put it in as the very top pillar, because I believe it does have the potential to unlock all of what Society 5.1 has to offer here. But if it is going to do that, it actually needs to be fixed in some way, because education is not fit for purpose. Education is unable really to do that at this point in time, so we've got to fix it. And if we're going to fix it, I think what we have to go for is a moonshot. Now, if we look at what's happening on Earth at the moment, we have 8 billion people. That is set to rise to 10 billion people by 2050. So the moonshot that I'm putting on the table for everybody here, it's a moonshot to educate the next 2 billion people in Society 5.1. Now, you're probably saying, what is a moonshot? I want to bring you back to the 1960s, to President John F. Kennedy, who inspired the American people in September 1962 by saying, I want us to go to the moon. and it's an expedition I will not postpone. And what was magnificent about it was 7 years later, on the 16th of July 1969, US astronauts landed on the moon. But for me, what was even more exciting was all of the innovations that came from that. So we wouldn't have CAT scans, LED lights, laptops, computer mice, only for that one big moonshot. So I asked myself, with our own moonshot, to educate the next 2 billion people on this planet for Society 5.1, what might our moonshot be? So I'm suggesting that our moonshot is to, I'd say we have to reimagine the purpose of education. I think we need to ask, who could our teachers be? Where would learning happen? What learning will be important? How will learning be important, and where will it happen? More than this, I have an ambition that our moonshot could deliver a Mary George into every classroom, that every single child could have a Mary George, and that a child born today would want to be a Mary George in 2050. And with that kind of ambition, we would be able to unlock the potential of Society 5.1. Now, to do that, I think we have to have a very different model of innovation. To date, you've probably heard of human-centered innovation. I'm actually pushing for something which is life-centric, and this is the model. So it's life-centric innovation, and it's all about having an ethical and a values-based stance throughout the process, taking account of the environment, taking account of human and non-human stakeholders. And what it involves are 4 different stages. It starts with desirability or design thinking, which is really all about trying to use compassion to find out what are the problems and what are the solutions that we could actually deliver. When we get to feasibility, it's all about trying to iterate and prototype. For viability, it's developing an economic business model. And then when we get to responsibility, it's about having that ethical, values-based stance that we understand the consequences of every single action that we take in that innovation journey. So our moonshot is to educate the next 2 billion people for Society 5.1. I believe that our rocket is going to be a moonshot hub that will gather super diverse teams from around the world to solve this moonshot. And I'm inviting all of you here to join me on that really exciting mission.